Ladies and gentlemen, when you stop talking to a man, the first thing that happens is not what you think. He doesn't suddenly forget you. He doesn't magically move on overnight. What really happens is his routine gets shaken up. See, men are creatures of habit. We get comfortable with consistency. When you were always there, always explaining, he built you into his daily rhythm. So when you go silent, that rhythm breaks and confusion sets in. When you stop talking to him, the first thing that happens is not drama, not anger, not even sadness. The first thing that happens is disruption. You interrupt his routine, and most people don't understand how powerful that is. Men get comfortable. Once something becomes familiar, we stop questioning it. We stop appreciating it. Your messages, your calls, your check-ins became part of his normal day like background noise. He didn't wake up every morning grateful for it. He just expected it to be there. So when you go quiet, his day feels off. Not emotionally at first, but structurally. Something is missing even if he can't name it. He checks his phone out of habit. He scrolls. He refreshes. And when he realizes there's nothing from you, his mind starts searching for reasons. Not because he misses you yet, but because control has slipped. Something changed without his approval, and that bothers him. At this stage, he might act unbothered. He might tell himself, "You're just busy." He might even enjoy the silence for a moment, thinking he finally has space. Comfort doesn't last when it's unfamiliar. Once the silence stretches longer than expected, it starts to feel strange. He notices how often he used to hear from you. He notices how much energy you used to bring. And that's when routine turns into reflection. He starts realizing how much he relied on your presence without acknowledging it. You were the one checking in. You were the one holding conversations together. You were the one keeping the connection alive. And now that effort is gone, not replaced. Just gone. That absence forces him to recognize something uncomfortable. He benefited from you more than he admitted. This is where the mental imbalance begins. He doesn't know how to respond because there's nothing to respond to, no message to answer, no emotion to manage, no explanation to dismiss. Silence leaves him alone with his thoughts, and those thoughts are persistent. They show him patterns he ignored. They remind him how consistent you were. They highlight how passive he became. And here's the part most people miss. When you stop talking, you stop reinforcing his comfort. You stop reminding him that you'll always be there no matter how little he gives. That creates uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people pay attention. Suddenly, he's more aware of your value because he feels the risk of losing access to it. He may not say anything right away. Men often process internally before acting, but internally, his sense of control is challenged. He wonders if you're pulling away for good. He wonders if someone else now has your attention. He wonders if he misjudged how much you were willing to tolerate. That questioning doesn't come from ego alone. It comes from realizing the balance shifted. Your silence rewrites the dynamic. Before, he knew where you stood. Now, he doesn't, and not knowing puts him on edge. He might replay moments when you reached out and he responded late, times you cared more than he did, times he assumed you'd always be available. The routine he once ignored becomes the thing he notices most. So understand this clearly. When you stop talking to him, you don't disappear from his mind. You become louder in a different way. You remove predictability, you remove comfort, you remove access. And that forces him to see the connection differently, not as something guaranteed, as something he might actually lose. When you stop talking to him, what really happens next is deeper than surface level confusion. Your absence forces him to confront feelings he's been avoiding. And understand this clearly, men are very good at avoiding emotions when everything feels stable. As long as you were present, as long as you were speaking, explaining, checking in, He didn't have to think too hard about how he actually felt. Your voice softened the space where self-reflection should have lived. Silence removes the cushion. When you're no longer there filling the gaps, the emotional noise quiets down, and that's when the real thoughts show up. He starts noticing emotions he pushed aside because now there's nothing distracting him, no conversation to deflect, no reaction to manage, just him and his mind. And that can be uncomfortable for a man who isn't used to sitting with his feelings. At first, he might try to stay logical. He'll tell himself he's fine. He'll say it's no big deal. He'll focus on work, friends, distractions. Emotions don't disappear just because you ignore them. They wait. And when silence lingers, those emotions rise to the surface. He starts asking himself questions he never asked before. Why does this feel different? Why does her absence bother me? Why do I keep thinking about her now that she's gone quiet? This is where honesty starts creeping in. Without your presence reassuring him, he has to be honest about how much you mattered. He realizes that you weren't just someone to talk to. You were someone who made him feel seen, supported, and understood. And now that emotional support isn't available on demand, that realization hits slowly, but when it does, it hits hard. He begins to recognize the emotional safety you provided, the way you listened, the way you cared, the way you stayed even when it wasn't easy. And once that's gone, he feels the emotional weight he didn't feel before. That's not something men immediately admit out loud, but internally, it's powerful. He understands that losing you means losing more than conversation. It means losing connection. Your silence also exposes his emotional investment or lack of it. He has to face whether he truly valued you or simply enjoyed the convenience of you. And that realization can be uncomfortable because it challenges his self. Nobody likes realizing they took someone for granted. Silence has a way of pulling the truth out when words no longer cover it up. As time passes, emotion replaces ego. At first, his pride might resist reaching out. But feelings don't operate on pride, they operate on attachment. And when attachment becomes clear, it creates tension. He wants clarity, he wants reassurance, but he no longer has access to either. That's when emotion becomes undeniable. He might feel regret, he might feel longing, he might feel uncertainty. But whatever he feels, it's real, and it's happening because your absence removed the emotional noise. You didn't demand answers. You didn't force a conversation. You simply stepped back, and that space made him feel everything he avoided before. So when you stop talking to him, don't assume nothing is happening just because he's quiet. Emotional processing doesn't always make noise. Sometimes the loudest changes happen internally. Your silence didn't erase you from his heart, forced him to finally listen to it. When you stop talking to him, something interesting starts happening in his mind. He begins replaying moments he once took for granted, and this doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks up on him. At first, it's small things, a laugh you shared, a message you used to send at a certain time, a way you checked in without being asked. These memories don't come because he planned to think about you. They come because his mind is trying to fill the space you left behind. See, when you were present, those moments felt ordinary to him, familiar, predictable. He didn't pause to appreciate them because they were always there. Consistency can make people careless. When someone shows up every time, we start believing they always will. So he didn't archive those moments as special. He filed them under normal. But silence changes the value of memories. Now that you're quiet, those same moments start carrying weight. He remembers how you used to listen, really listen, not just wait for your turn to talk. He remembers how you supported him without asking for much in return. He remembers times you showed patience when he was distracted, distant, or unsure. And suddenly, what felt ordinary before feels rare. His mind starts doing comparisons. Not intentionally, but naturally. He compares how he feels now to how he felt when you were around. He notices the emotional gap. He realizes conversations don't flow the same with others. He realizes not everyone cares the way you did. And that's when appreciation shows up late, but strong. This replay isn't just about missing you, it's about recognizing effort. He sees how much you poured in, how often you reached out, how many chances you gave, how many times you chose understanding over walking away. And now that you've stepped back, he understands something important. Effort feels invisible when it's consistent, but obvious when it's gone. There's also regret mixed in. Not always dramatic regret, but subtle moments of self-questioning. He wonders why he didn't do more, why he didn't show appreciation when he had the chance, why he assumed time would always be available. Silence forces those questions because there's no new interaction to distract him from the past. He may replay moments where he could have spoken up but didn't. Times he could have shown care but chose comfort instead. Times you needed reassurance and he brushed it off. These memories don't come to punish him, they come to teach him. Silence turns memory into a mirror, and that mirror doesn't lie. What makes this powerful is that he didn't feel this way when you were explaining yourself. When you were talking, emotions stayed focused on the present, but when you stop talking, the past becomes louder. He can't change those moments now, he can only feel them. And that realization carries weight. This is also when emotional attachment becomes clearer to him. He understands that you weren't just someone passing time with him, you were someone adding value to his life. And now that value feels distant. The laughter, the comfort, the familiarity, all of it feels different when it's no longer accessible. So when you stop talking, don't assume he forgets. Often, he remembers more than ever before. Silence turns overlooked moments into meaningful ones. It teaches him the worth of what he once had by taking away the opportunity to experience it again in the same way. When you stop talking to him, curiosity slowly turns into concern. At first, it's light. He wonders what you're doing. He asks himself why you haven't reached out. Curiosity doesn't stay curious for long when silence holds steady. It deepens. It starts tapping him on the shoulder during quiet moments, driving alone, late at night, early in the morning. That's when concern begins to grow because unanswered questions have weight. He starts checking for signs, not because he's desperate, but because he's unsettled. He might look at his phone more often. He might notice your absence online. He might wonder if you're still thinking about him the way he's thinking about you. Silence creates mystery, and mystery demands attention. When someone who was once predictable becomes unreadable, the mind fills in the blanks. This concern doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as irritation. He may feel annoyed without knowing why. Restless, slightly off balance. That's because certainty gives comfort, and your silence removed certainty. He no longer knows where he stands with you, and that uncertainty makes him uneasy. People don't like not knowing their position in someone's life. Then his imagination gets involved. He starts imagining scenarios. Are you happier without him? Did you finally get tired of being the one who cared more? Did someone else step into the space he neglected? These thoughts don't come because he has proof. They come because silence leaves room for interpretation. And the mind almost never chooses the most comfortable option. What's important here is that concern shows emotional investment. Even if he never admitted it before, your absence reveals it. If you didn't matter, he wouldn't wonder. He wouldn't imagine. He wouldn't feel unsettled. Silence exposes attachment because it removes reassurance. And without reassurance, feelings surface on their own. He may try to distract himself, work harder, go out more, keep busy. But concern has a way of following you. It shows up when distractions fade, when the day slows down, when there's nothing else demanding attention. That's when he feels it most. Not hearing from you feels heavier than he expected, and that surprises him. At some point, curiosity shifts into a need for clarity. He wants to know what changed. He wants to know if the door is still open. But pride often delays action. Men don't always reach out when they're confused. They wait, hoping the situation will resolve itself. But silence doesn't resolve, it amplifies. Your quiet forces him to confront something uncomfortable. He realizes he no longer has automatic access to you. He can't assume you'll explain yourself. He can't assume you'll check in. That realization makes him aware of how much he relied on your availability. And concern grows when access is no longer guaranteed. This is also where respect quietly builds, not loud respect, not spoken respect, internal respect. He begins to see that you didn't disappear to punish him, you disappeared to protect yourself. And that shifts how he views you. You're no longer someone waiting around, you're someone who knows when to step back. So when you stop talking to him, understand this. Curiosity doesn't fade, it evolves. It turns into concern because silence removes comfort and predictability. And that concern forces him to think about you differently, not as someone always there, but as someone whose absence actually matters. When you stop talking to him, his ego shows up before his heart ever does. That's how most men are wired. Ego is the first line of defense. It steps in to protect pride, image, and control. So before he ever admits he misses you, before he ever acknowledges he feels the absence, his ego tries to explain it away. He tells himself you're being dramatic. He tells himself you'll be back. He tells himself he's not affected. Ego talks loud when it's afraid. At first, the ego convinces him he's winning. He thinks silence means he has the upper hand. He might even enjoy the idea that you're waiting, that you're trying to prove a point. Ego loves illusions of control. As long as he believes you're silent because of him, not because of your own growth, he feels safe. But that safety doesn't last. When time passes and you don't return the way he expected, ego starts cracking, because ego depends on reaction. It needs validation, and your silence gives none of that. No emotion, no explanation, no reassurance. That's when ego turns defensive. He might feel irritated, he might feel dismissed, he might feel challenged. And that's because ego doesn't like being ignored. It likes being acknowledged. This is when his thoughts shift from confidence to confusion. He wonders why you're not chasing, why you're not checking in, why you're not asking questions. Ego starts asking questions it doesn't want answers to. Did she finally see her worth? Did she stop needing me? Did I lose something I thought was guaranteed? Ego hates uncertainty because uncertainty exposes vulnerability. But here's the truth. Ego can only hold the front for so long. Eventually, the heart starts speaking quietly in the background, not with drama, not with desperation, just with awareness. He starts noticing how empty certain moments feel, how quiet his phone is, how different his days feel without your presence. Ego tries to dismiss it, but the heart doesn't argue, it observes. The heart reminds him of connection, of comfort, of familiarity. It reminds him that you weren't just someone boosting his pride, you were someone who made life feel easier. And that realization is uncomfortable because it means admitting loss. Ego resists that admission because admitting loss means admitting he didn't value you enough while you were there. This inner conflict creates tension. Ego wants to protect pride. Heart wants to acknowledge truth. That's why he might hesitate to reach out. That's why he might draft messages and delete them. That's why he might check in indirectly instead of directly. Ego doesn't want to look vulnerable, but the heart wants relief. Your silence forces this internal battle. When you were talking, ego stayed fed. It got attention, reassurance, engagement. Silence starves ego and feeds clarity. The longer you stay quiet, the harder it becomes for ego to pretend nothing changed. The heart gets louder, not by shouting, but by being consistent. At some point, ego gets tired. It can't keep pretending forever. That's when truth begins to surface. Not always in words, but in feeling. He realizes he didn't lose control, he lost connection. And that realization doesn't come from arguments or explanations. It comes from silence doing what words never could. When you stop talking to him, something powerful happens that most people underestimate. Your self-respect steps into the spotlight. And self-respect is loud even when you say nothing. See, when you were constantly explaining yourself, checking in, trying to keep the connection alive, he knew where you stood. He knew you were invested. He knew you cared. And because of that certainty, he didn't feel urgency. People rarely rush to protect what they believe